Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Glad you could be here for today's show. We've got a good one in store for you. And beginning the broadcast, the University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources, or IANR, has a commitment to the state's 93 counties and the farmers that call them home. A big way that's done is through research, teaching, and extension education. And that's a big job because there's always something to teach and something to learn. IANR's Harlan Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mike Boehm, joined me to discuss IANR's accomplishments in 2019, the goals for 2020, and what it means for the state's producers.
You know, IANR is an amazing platform for making a difference in the world. And we start with a focus right there on Nebraska, thinking about how we produce food, fuel, feed, and fiber for this growing world that we live in, how we produce that food, being mindful of the sustainability of our natural resources, which Nebraska's, abundant in spades, our water, our air, and being mindful about the success of Nebraskans and thinking about success of individuals, whether those are students here at UNL or across the system or back in local communities, and how those individuals make up families and communities. That's really what we're about.
And 2019 was a tough year for a lot of producers across the state, but also a lot of goals were accomplished during that time too. What were some of the things that you're most proud of?
Yeah, well, I'm most proud about, and you're right, 2019, what a year on so many fronts, right? The Boehm cyclones and about a year ago, right? March of 2019. Didn't even know what a Boehm cyclone was, Troy.
Now we know all about it.
Now we know all about it, unfortunately. And then the subsequent flooding that swelled our nearly 80,000 miles of streams and creeks and rivers to beyond imagination, and the breaking of the dam and just the flooding and the impact that had on our production land, but mostly on our communities. That was the beginning. Throw the complexities of global trade and international trade into that mix. It was really a tough and complex year for producers across the state. So what was I most proud of? Well, I was most proud of, first and foremost, to be a Nebraskan. I was proud to watch Nebraskans deal with that adversity, their resilience shone through, how they rolled up their sleeves, and how Nebraska Extension and other parts of the university were right there working in partnership to figure out what communities needed during the height of the flooding, and then thinking about how to find that new normal. I was glad that IANR, through Extension and beyond, that we were a part of that, no question. So those were some highlights on our research front, the Agricultural Research Division. Boy, our faculty continue to knock it out of the park. Again, not being boastful, but IANR, we are responsible for nearly half of the research expenditures at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Incredible. So when you think about our researchers and the work that they're doing in our laboratories, our basic science, but also the science that is only possible working in partnership with our farmers and our ranchers. The translational research, I would call it, just really an incredible trifecta, if you will, in our teaching and learning, research, innovation, and outreach and engagement efforts through Nebraska Extension. It was a full court press, and it was a full court partnership with the people of this great state.
Oh, very impressive.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, and of course, hey, it's not stopping here. I know that 2020 has a lot in store. What are some of the goals you have in mind, or any information regarding research or grants that would benefit our farmers?
Yeah, so the buzz is real in Nebraska, and the momentum in the Institute just continues to move things forward. You know, Nebraska's special in that we produce nearly 26 billion of our economy is tied to agriculture writ large, right?
Yeah.
So as we think about cropping systems and livestock production, of course, we're the beef state, no question about that, but we also have 3.5 million head of hogs, and poultry is coming on really strong with the likes of Hendrick's Genetics, both in turkey and chickens, but also Costco.
All right, yeah.
That is an incredible operation, but we have goats and sheep, actually. A lot of our cattle producers are, especially our cow-calf producers out in the sandhills, are looking at diversification and value add. So, I think on that front, our production system is really incredible. But the magic in Nebraska is we think about integrated production systems, and you have to then think about how we harmonize production with the sustainability of our natural resources. And chief among those, of course, our soils, our water. And our producers in the state are really internationally known as being not only amazing producers, but great shepherds of that natural resource. And so one of the things we do in Nebraska better than any place I've been is this harmonizing of production ag with sustainability of our natual resources.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, what's your final message for the farmers and producers who are watching?
Yeah, my final message to everybody, to the farmers and producers, are first and foremost, we can't do what we do without the partnership with our amazingly innovative ranchers, processors, farmers, producers, rural leaders. That's the bottom line. And so I think we do some things amazingly well, and we're proud of those things, and we continue to listen to move the needle. But our bottom line is we can't be what we can be without that partnership with these producers in this amazing state.
Thanks again to Mike for coming by. He's a busy guy, so definitely appreciate his time. For more on what IANR does and how it helps Nebraska farmers, you can visit ianr.unl.edu. We've got the link on the Market Journal website as well. Time for this week's market segment, and we spoke with Jeff Peterson on Wednesday. Some of the big topics this week: President Trump's 2021 budget proposal has been released. We'll look at what changes are in it for ag. Plus, with the coronavirus and a wealth of export options in South America, will China be able to fulfill its part of the Phase 1 trade deal? We'll look at that. But we began our discussion with this week's WASDE report and how much of a market mover it was.
Yeah, it typically kind of served up a typical style February report as it turned out. It had the potential to have some fireworks in it because there was traders on both sides, bullish and bearish side, that were saying, are they going to factor in some of the Phase 1 trade deal information? And they factored in a little bit, I'd say, on the soybean side. They went ahead and raised the exports about 50 million bushels, brought us in at 425 million, which that was actually less than what we ended up seeing was expected at the 448 million, and down from the 475 from where we would have been back in January. But on corn, it was pretty quiet. We went ahead and reduced exports, which that was pretty much, I think everybody was thinking that could happen, but maybe they'd wait a month. But then on top of that, they went ahead and bumped up the ethanol. But as we dig deeper into those ethanol numbers, and those two offset each other, I don't think it was so much that they thought we were going to produce more ethanol. What we're running into in many of these plants is that the test weight is lower on this corn. So it's taking, on average, we're seeing about 4% more corn to get the same amount yield on the ethanol side. So I think that kind of came into play there. Down the road, I think a few things. I'm a little concerned on that export number, though, to be honest with you, Troy, because right now we're up about 6% year to date. USDA thinks we're going to be up about 1.5%, but we're coming into a time when beans are going to be a lot cheaper coming out of South America. So I'm worried down the road that our ending stocks on beans might bump up a little bit unless China really steps in and buys.
And that leads right into the next question. I want to look at trade with China, then kind of how it relates or intertwines in with South America too. So China says that they're going to start buying more from us because of that trade deal. So, but then when you look at the prices of commodities in South America, I ask myself, okay, what's the path for China fulfilling their end of the agreement?
Yeah, that's the great question. That's the one that we every day honestly ask ourselves, because as we take a look at just some numbers we've seen, and it depends on who you listen to in regard to what the values are, but coming out of the Port of Paranagua versus the PNW Pacific Northwest, what we're seeing there is that those would be two kind of comparable locations to come out of Brazil and also the U.S. Some would say there's a 20-cent difference in price. Some would say it's as much as 52-cent difference in price. And that's that soybeans are cheaper out of Brazil. And keep in mind, they're on the very, very front end of their harvest, so their values will actually get cheaper yet than what we're seeing here in the U.S. Our U.S. basis values are very strong because there just isn't enough soybeans moving. So our spread between us just continues to increase. The other thing that's going on that there's not a lot of talk about is the spread between the U.S. dollar and the Brazilian real. And the Brazilian real is just tanking. The dollar's gaining steadily some strength. So as a result, that makes their beans even that much cheaper in relation to ours. So it makes it really hard to see when China is going to come in and want to start buying some of our beans.
And I've also seen you tweeting a lot about the coronavirus. Everybody at home, follow Jeff on Twitter. He's Jeff Peterson 01. So one thing I wonder about is, since China has been dealing with this outbreak, and maybe rightfully so, the responsibilities on fulfilling the Phase 1 trade deal don't become as much of a priority. Speak on that a little bit if you could.
Yeah, I think so. And there was some talk about that. So let's think about the provisions of the Phase 1 trade deal. Some of those provisions are, if either country, the U.S. or China, believes that the other party isn't holding up their end of the deal, there can be a consultation. And actually there was some talk a couple weeks ago that China wanted to talk about their ability to hold up their end of the Phase 1 trade deal. Now, it doesn't look like it ever made a formal request, but it looked like it got awfully close. One of the things I'm concerned about as it relates to whether or not they're able to buy or not, Troy, is whether or not they use that down the road to say, we really wanted to be able to hit our numbers, but we just couldn't because of the problems we ran in with that coronavirus. And I think that's a possibility down the road yet.
Okay, let's move over to corn for a second. So give us an idea as to what you see right now in terms of U.S. corn acreage, and along with that, price potential possibly.
Yeah, exactly. So as we dig into that, this is always that time of year where we start pulling our information together. We've got the Outlook meeting that comes out at the end of the month, February 21st and 22nd. That'll be a look at that information. In addition, you got the Planning Intentions Report on March 31st. But as we put our numbers together, last year there was about 18.2 million acres of prevent plant. And of that, we're kind of the opinion, we think about 13 million, maybe 14 million of that will come back into production. And we're not sure on the breakdown, but our first stab at this looks like we'll take about 7 million to corn, about 6 million acres over to soybeans. And if we do that, then we have to look at the yield. And the yield we're using is about a 178 yield. That's kind of where USDA came out in their baseline numbers back in November. If we end up doing that, that ends up giving us over 15 billion bushels of production. And we increase demand about 700 million, which that might be a little bit aggressive, but that still gives us almost 3 billion bushels of ending stocks, or over a 20.2% stocks to use. Now, I'm not saying prices are headed this direction right away, and there's some things in regard to weather that could cause us to go ahead and not get all those acres planted, but if that would happen, Troy, we'd be looking at, coming this harvest, we'd be looking at $3 or below $3 on the futures for corn.
Okay, so let's get some insights into President Trump's 2021 budget proposal, and that was released a few days back. Agriculture could be seeing some cuts from that budget, right?
It does, and there was a number of items talked about. You get SNAP included in that, but one of the areas that I took a look at was on the crop insurance side. And if you dig into that, the big deal in the crop insurance gets to be the subsidies. And as we, from the marketing side, look at how do we set up a good marketing plan, we always want crop insurance there, and we want it strong to give us that foundation to be comfortable to make those pre-harvest sales. What's being talked about, though, in the budget, though, would be about a $25 billion reduction over 10 years. That'd be about a $2.5 billion per year reduction. I hope that doesn't get voted on, doesn't get put through that way, because I really want to see that strong safety net that we have through basically the crop insurance stay there.
Yeah, and as far as crop insurance, now's a good time of year to make sure you got everything squared away with that, right?
It really is. The March 15th deadline will be coming up, and what you're going to end up having to do is make sure you're watching along. The thing about that is that the spring price is now calculating. So on corn, what we're doing is we're working off of the February, during the month of February, the December futures for corn, and over on soybeans, it's working on establishing that base price through February based off the November futures price.
Next week, we'll be joined by DTN's Todd Holtman. So if you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Next up, soybean gall midge has been identified in Nebraska fields as far back as 2011. but it hasn't always been considered a major pest, at least until 2018, when it killed soybean plants in fields in over 60 counties in the Midwest early on in the season. Since then, Nebraska Extension Cropping Systems and Crop Protection Specialist Justin McMecken and his colleagues have ramped up research on the gall midge. They're shedding new light on the insect's emergence patterns and confirming it as a new species of gall midge. However, last year, researchers identified possible alternative hosts that may provide some biological control. Learn more in the February Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, sunny but still a bit chilly this week. Pretty stable weather pattern though, with no major systems moving through. What can we expect coming up?
Well, Troy, we did have basically what I would call just kind of an average week. If you took the temperatures on the high side and the low side and basically averaged them all together, we came out normal. But we've seen some extreme changes in temperature, particularly we moved from Tuesday to Wednesday when we've seen that cold front blow through the state. Temperatures dropped off rapidly, and of course we've seen the very high winds that are associated with that. And then of course Thursday morning we've seen those lows dropping in the sub-zero range across a substantial portion of eastern Nebraska. So very strong wind chills in the 20 to 30 below range. Made a very miserable day, but we actually rebounded pretty well considering how far we dropped in the temperatures on Thursday, and we got up into the teens with a relaxation of winds during the afternoon. And then of course yesterday we basically seen the temperatures rise up to near the normal range, and we'd actually have a halfway decent weekend in store for us, and that might actually hold us into at least the first half of Monday before we start to worry about things going downhill rather rapidly as we get another shot of cold air moving into the region. So looking at the upper air model, the little wave that moved through during the overnight hours is now past to the east of us. We're going to get kind of a downsloping westerly flow from the mountains, and that should be a compressional heating, give us some warmer temperatures. Basically looking at the low to mid 40s across a lot of the state. We do show some low pressure developing at the surface in eastern Colorado. Most of the precipitation, though, is going to remain in the northern Rockies and the northern plains. As we go into tomorrow, we get a much more stronger zonal flow, and it looks like to be the warmest day of this next 3 days as we see surface lows trying to develop along the front range of the Rocky Mountains, but there's really no overall push of moisture. So most of the activity is up into the Pacific Northwest and the northern Rockies, and we're pretty free of any precipitation in the central plains. By Monday, we see this trough starting to develop into the southwest, and that's going to start to shoot out some warmer air to the south of us, and low pressure starts to develop in the Texas Panhandle, and that's going to help push moisture up toward the north. But the Boehm energy is so far southwestward that we're not going to really see much of it in Nebraska, coming to our north and northwest. But by Tuesday morning, the front, basically the jet stream moves across the southern portion of the state with that low kind of riding along that jet stream. We should start to see some precipitation break out, particularly northern Kansas and the border region. But it looks like the best accumulating snowfall will be in the southwest. Now as we get into Wednesday, we start to see the ridge rapidly returning, so we're going to start to see temperatures warm up as the high pressure moves to our southeast. We will start to see a warming trend as winds start to shift around toward the west-southwest, but most of the precipitation will remain to our south as that cold air focuses some convection and some snow accumulations in Texas. And we see that low still sitting out there. We get a southwest flow, so we're going to continue to see some of the warmer air move into our region. But once again, we're kind of constrained somewhat with that low out in the southwest. We're really not getting the moisture and trained up into our region. It's going to stay into the southwest at least through Thursday. On Friday, we start to see the system ejecting out, and the big question is it going to move toward the northeast or is it going to move straight eastward? And right now, the models, at least from the GFS point, take it more of an easterly track. That means the low in Texas will generate precipitation to the east, a little bit in the southern Rockies in the form of rainfall, and kind of missing our region. If this moves a little bit farther to the north, then we would see much more broader expansive rainfall across south central and southeastern Nebraska. Now going a little bit farther down the road, you notice it's big above normal temperatures. I talked about this last week. It does look like high pressure will move in, and we are going to see a warming trend, particularly as we get around the 22nd and 23rd. So from next Thursday to the following Tuesday, above normal temperatures for most areas from Nebraska eastward, below normal in the southern Rockies. In terms of precipitation, of course, with the high pressure aloft, we're going to be looking at below normal precipitation across most of Nebraska, and it does look like, once again, another nice weekend as most of the heavy precipitation remains to our south and to our east. So Troy, overall, we're going to have a fairly nice weekend, and then we start to see conditions deteriorate somewhat as we get into Monday and Tuesday as colder air starts to work its way into the region, and then we'll see a nice gentle warm up as we go to the end of next week, and potentially, as we get into next weekend, of another nice weekend in store.
Thanks, Al. Next up, the 2018 Farm Bill brought a new commodity to the Cornhusker state when hemp became legal to grow in Nebraska last year. However, only a handful of Nebraskans were selected for the initial pilot program, and Annette and Bruce Wiles were lucky enough to become licensed participants. They're growing hemp at their farm, which is also used for hops. Market Journal's Bill Dodd got an inside look at how their first hemp crop has turned out. Bill, how are things going for the Wiles at their farm in Plattsmouth?
Thanks, Troy. Bruce and Annette were kind enough to let me snoop around and give our viewers an inside look at the process that they're developing at the hop yard. Now, while midwinter doesn't really feel like a harvest season, as the hops are going out of season, the hemp is getting ready to hit the market. And Annette tells me that this has been a learning experience from start to finish.
Okay, so now we just have to figure out what we do. All this stuff needs to be rehydrated though. So
It wasn't that long ago that these plants weren't even legal in Nebraska.
I think she looks perfect.
We got our first look at the hop yard's hemp production this past October. The plants were really coming along in the greenhouse at the time. Fast forward several months, and today was the culmination of a process that dated back to the release of the 2018 Farm Bill.
So in the last 6 months, we have been growing hemp plants in the greenhouse. The last few weeks, we started to harvest. The first 2 varieties, we did a wet trim, which we ran them through at least 80% moisture. The last 2 varieties, we've dried down in the greenhouse and air hung, which is the normal way that people dry hemp today. And we are going to be dry trimming, bucking, and dry trimming them.
Before trying their hand at growing hops and hemp, Bruce had tended to more traditional crops like corn and soybeans. Since updating their new operation and pioneering relatively new crops, Bruce and Annette have learned that this isn't your typical agricultural experience.
I would say they're a lot more hands-on. You really need to be in touch with the crop of when the maturity is ready. Corn and beans have a lot of equipment, have a lot of pesticides and herbicides that are available today. Hemp does not. There are very few that are approved, and if they are, they're mostly organic. So you really have to look at your crop every day. You have to watch for making sure that you have no males within the crop. You have to make sure the fertilizer is where it needs to be, the water is where it needs to be, in order to get the optimal harvest at the right time.
Now that harvest has begun to wrap up, marketing the new crop will be the next challenge for the hemp entrepreneurs. And with such a versatile crop, there are several possibilities as to how they can achieve marketing success.
So what we're looking at right now is we have been looking nationally at some of the best CBD products available because we know we're not going to be able to do everything on our own. So we want to have additional products in addition to potentially look at selling the flower that we grew, maybe smokable flower this year. Also looking at taking some of the biomass that we've recovered, drying that down and extracting the oils out of that, potentially to make some tinctures. We are also maybe looking at making some hemp tea. We also have honeybees on the property, so the hemp tea would complement our honey, and it could really truly be a farm-to-table experience here at the Hop Yard.
So, the first growing season seems to be a success so far. However, while things are winding down for these producers, things are still winding up in the second session of the 106th Nebraska legislative session. One new bill proposed by Senator Justin Wayne is seeking to make further changes to Nebraska's newly adopted hemp policy. This is something we're going to keep a close eye on as the session progresses. But Troy, that's what I've got my eye on this week. We'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Bill. Great story. Finally today, the 35th Annual Women in Agriculture Conference begins next week at the Holiday Inn in Kearney. Whether you're a farmer, a farmer's wife, or an ag industry professional, this event is an excellent networking opportunity that has everything you're looking for. That includes opportunities to hear from experts on agricultural risk management, along with 5 general session speakers.
So celebrating 35 years, we're really excited about it. We have a great lineup of speakers, and that includes Michelle Payne, who is actually the founder of Ag Chat, if you've ever been on Twitter. She founded that, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit about how we deal with food bullying and how we have conversations with others about the products that we produce. We also have Amanda Radke from Mitchell, South Dakota. She's a blogger for Beef Magazine. She's going to be talking about multi-generational ranching, and it's really exciting to have her with us because she is a millennial who's a part of her operation, and she also has a lot of experience talking about agriculture and how family dynamics work.
On top of the general session speakers, there will be over 30 workshops spread over the 2-day event. They range from crop and livestock production to rental rates and policy decisions.
First, we have Alan Vanalik, who is the Farm, Estate, and Transition Specialist here at the University of Nebraska. He'll be speaking a couple of different times. The first time he'll be discussing farm transition, and the second time he'll be discussing negotiations. So those are two really popular and great topics. We'll also have Robert Tigner talking about the Farm Bill and the difference between the ARC and PLC selection for the 2019 and 2020 crop years. And then we'll also have various speakers regarding marketing. We have a gal from South Dakota coming. Her name is Adele Hardy, and she has a great talk on livestock marketing. We also have Naomi Bloom coming, and she'll be talking about grain marketing. So those are two really can't miss workshops for this year's conference.
And while this event is tailored to women in the agricultural industry, that doesn't mean men aren't allowed to attend. In fact, male attendance is encouraged.
Yeah, so we actually do have some spouses who choose to attend, and we've also seen a couple of father-daughter couples that come together as well. And it's really just that opportunity for you to start that conversation. So we do allow men to come, but do know you will be in the minority.
The two-day event kicks off next Thursday the 20th and runs until Friday the 21st at the Holiday Inn. If you haven't already registered, the two-day registration fee is now $150 per person. A one-day registration is $75 per person. You can find more information at wia.unl.edu. We've got a link on the Market Journal website too. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. Next week, we'll head over to Briggs Feed Yard for a check on the cattle markets with none other than Mike Briggs. Plus, a new grant could give corn and wheat growers hands-on experience with cutting-edge technology in soil and water management. All that and a whole lot more. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.